No matter what kind of adversity we're facing, whether it's relationship challenges, health problems, we'll tackle the issue, we'll figure out our solutions, and we're pretty good at all of that. But you know, the part that's not mentioned, people don't often talk about the vibrational aspect of that adversity, of that challenge that we're in. And you know, it's so important because it's an integral part of us. Vibration is all of life, all of everything. And so in our balance journey, you know, if we intend to work through the whole issue, if we really want to find new levels of real groundedness and good balance in ourselves and in our situations, then we can't just work through that surface stuff. We have to make sure that vibration is a part of our narrative. And so in this video, what we're going to look at is why it's so important that we normalize the vibration narrative. We'll look at some things that we can do to neutralize the vibrational aspects of our challenges and what attitudes that we need to nurture for vibrational success. And after watching this, I believe you will assess life situations from that broader perspective that includes vibration. You'll seek to clear things vibrationally as you move forward, feel more attuned to your own vibrational feedback, and just know how to incorporate vibration in how you think and the actions that you take. By the way, I'm Heidi and I'm very glad you're here. I'm definitely not claiming to be an expert on vibration or anything else, but I can tell you from my own experience of over 50 years of applying vibrational understanding and just watching and paying attention to that aspect as I've faced adversity and so forth. I'm just here to put a spotlight on that important topic because I hope that it will encourage you to not neglect your vibration in your balance journey. This is the Balance Journey, where we're all about turning challenges into growth opportunities and bringing mindfulness to everyday life. Okay, let's start with this disclaimer. This video is not about vibration in terms of like what you can do to manipulate vibration. Not at all. I really feel like we should just understand that there is a universal law of vibration, and basics on that is that we can consciously increase our vibrational state, and that should be always with the aim of increasing and harmonizing our resonance with universal vibration. And as a result of that, the law is you will definitely then draw in experiences and individuals that are aligned with wherever your vibration is. So that's something that is definitely got to be at the baseline of this entire video because that's what vibration is. But what I want to do is just look at vibration in terms of just this daily life of thoughts and emotions, and how our own thoughts and emotions become words, they become actions, they become inner beliefs, and each of those has a vibration. We're not thinking about it, right? It's just a natural byproduct of where we're at with what we're thinking. And some people will say, okay, so stay positive, you know? And I personally have not experienced that to be effective because you can't fake vibration. So if I'm angry, if I am irritated, I can't fake the vibration that's supposed to be the positive vibration. I can only say right now, I'm angry, I'm irritated. And whatever that vibration is, it's important that that has a chance to resonate completely, obviously without hurting anybody else in the mix, you know, like going into a quiet space for yourself and raging about something, or you know, just letting it off your chest in a way that you feel can allow for your experience but at the same time not bother anybody else, then in that sense you can allow for vibration to dissipate. But you know, we're so busy with every day and all the things that we're doing that the tough stuff of life, the adversity, that's what makes us slow down, right? That's what makes us actually reconsider and reevaluate so that we can say, okay, what do I need to do? What do I need to shift? And of course, you're going to look for the things that you need to fix, or relationship issues that you might need to go to therapy for, whatever it can be. But you're always realizing that you're in an effect and you're looking for what maybe was the cause and also what is obviously the solution. So in terms of not only talking about of vibration, the law of cause and effect, or karma, is an additional aspect that I think has to at least be addressed right up front now. And that's because our natural tendency is going to be, let's look at the cause and the effect. That's okay. We're supposed to do that when we're facing the tough stuff of life, because we're supposed to make sure we don't go through something again, if at all possible. That's That's just a natural tendency for all of us. But we definitely have to balance that out with making sure that not only are you looking at the cause and effect, okay, who was at fault, who needs to fix this or whatever, but also you want to consider the vibrational aspect of cause and effect. So I have a question for you. How old were you when you first heard about karma and vibration? Because for me, I was growing up in Hawaii to a Japanese American father and a German mother. They met when my dad was stationed in Germany, and they came back to Hawaii, which is where he was from. And that's when I started getting introduced to his Buddhist ties, which is very common in Hawaii, and the talk of vibration through faith healing. So from the ages of 4 and 5, I'm being introduced to both this idea of karma, cause and effect, which is very much in the terminology of, just daily life and how to apply Buddhism to life. And then this concept of vibration and how we pay attention to it. So these concepts were a common narrative for me, not as like karma's going to get you or like you need to raise your vibration to have a better experience, but it was definitely in the narrative as opportunities to face the karma and neutralize the vibrational imbalances, whatever they were, by how I chose to face my challenges. So that was my experience at a very, very young age. And then throughout my life, I was growing up with that kind of vibrational narrative and that kind of approach to adversity. But I always felt like a weirdo, because society views problems differently at their surface value, and that's the typical narrative. But there was no reinforcement, no advice that I saw. This was way before the internet. Now I think we're much more able to find where we might gain some sort of support in those things. But in those days, from any mainstream outlets, nobody was talking about the vibrational narrative. And so nobody was helping me understand how vibrational cause and effect applied to my everyday interactions. So I just had to figure that out myself. And I'm glad that I did, and I have continued to apply that. And that's what I want to talk about as in terms of, making sure that we don't neglect vibration when it comes to how we're facing our adversity. Okay, so then we have to ask ourselves the question, how do I go beyond the typical narrative? And nobody needs help with the typical narrative, really. Or if we do, there's plenty of resources for that. But the typical narrative is ingrained in us. So that part's easy. And I want to share a story of how my husband and I went through adversity with a neighbor about 5 years ago, that we started with the typical narrative and then where we went with it. So the typical narrative is obviously, who's at fault. So it was my neighbor. Our neighbor was kind of a hermit guy. He definitely wasn't taking care of his home. And he had this huge live oak tree in his backyard. It was literally covering the entire backyard. And we had pretty big backyards. It was covering his backyard, and it was beginning to encroach over our fence line onto our property. And my husband, being very, very proactive, he was always out there, trimming what he could and so forth. And it had gotten to a point, though, where some of the branches were so high that they were literally resting on our roof. And throughout that period of time, we would cut as much as we could on our side, but he was never really participating in solving any of this issue. And whenever we would go out and really look at the situation, there would be this resentment, there would be this feeling of irritation and anger, because it's like, look, we're taking care of our side, our responsibility, but he's not doing his responsibility. And that is definitely a normal reaction of, he's the cause, we're getting this effect and so forth. And we did what we could for the longest time. But I will say that eventually, through like just contemplating and so forth, I was like, you know what, we need to be looking at this in a way that helps us to feel like we can stay centered, we can find our balance, despite the fact that he is not working with us. And he had at that point, moved out and basically abandoned the place. The branches, this is over a period of years, and the branches had started growing into his house and everything. It was just a crazy mess. But if we're going to then apply like what I'm going to call the vibration narrative. Let's just break that down in a way that makes it accessible for us. So to me, processing the vibrational aspect of cause and effect means that you have to first say, okay, I accept that I was part of a vibrational imbalance at some point. And that might feel very much like, nope, that's the other person's fault and I have nothing to do with it. And you're right. With that person and you probably don't see any correlation of cause and effect. And that's where vibration is the thing that I want to talk about. But in terms of the acceptance that, you know what, I accept that somewhere along the way there is vibrational imbalance, and this is an opportunity for vibration to return to balance or to dissipate, and therefore I can rise to a better vibration. Okay, so we're not always going to be able to identify like the one-to-one identical situation. You know, I did this to some neighbor and now this neighbor's doing this to me. We are just going to feel like, wow, you know, it feels like it's random, it feels very undeserved. But if we trust that vibration is always at play, and like the balance principle I mentioned in one of my videos, that all things are always seeking balance, then we're going to say, okay, well, how can I be a part of bringing this situation, this adversity to balance? And, you know, if you believe in the steadiness that this law of vibration, the law of cause and effect, that these things are just steady. They are what they are. They're not seeking to like zap you with adversity or trouble, but they are always seeking this return to harmony and balance with the universe. Then you just say, okay, I accept that I'm dealing with the vibrational effect of something that, an imbalance that I definitely have to neutralize, you know, because I'm facing this challenge. And as I'm facing that challenge, then it's an opportunity for me to work through the things that I'm not even aware of on that deeper vibrational level. And it is important at that point, you know, that we just get over the idea that, you know, we're being punished for these imbalances that we caused. You know, don't get caught up in that kind of mindset, that kind of negative thinking, because it should be a very positive experience to say, you know, this sucks. That part is not positive. I'm not happy. However, you know, we are not being punished. We just said, okay, whatever the case may be, we're facing this. How do we bring ourselves back to some sense of balance? And then we wanted to respect and work with the opportunity to go through the experience, because then we could maybe clear and neutralize things and create more balance in our vibration. That became the focus. And that means, in our experience, that the first step was that we couldn't just say, I don't feel bad about it. You know, like I said before, if you have that thought, if you have that emotion, that has its own vibration. And it was important that we couldn't make ourselves think more positively about the situation. We had to accept and allow the vibration of the feelings that we had, which were resentment and which were anger and frustration. So we can't fake our way vibrationally. And I actually did a video about that. It's called Embrace the Energy Within Your Feelings. And I'll leave the link below so that you can check that out. But in order to find ways to work with the situation, we definitely had to do things like interrupting the false narratives that can come up in our minds that, you know, we were somehow specially being singled out, or, you know, like, we're trying so hard, like, why do we have to go through something like this? You know, we're not causing anybody else any problems. So it's important then that we disciplined our thinking and we accepted, okay, well, we're going through this experience, so it's an opportunity for us. So, you know, we had several discussions in our backyard, looking over the fence of that tree and contemplating what proactive steps we could take for ourselves. You know, my husband reached out to our neighbor, even though he wasn't living there anymore. Like, my husband tracked him down with just doing some research and sent him letters. But knowing that, okay, the other person wasn't forthcoming, we wanted to go beyond the typical narrative and actually say, okay, well, how are we going to approach this in that vibrational way? And we decided we'll call a tree trimming service, because we really wanted to focus on the fact that, you know what, in the grand scheme of things, no matter how irritating this situation is and how irresponsible this neighbor is being. The fact is, what we have, this plot of land, this space that we want to nurture, that was a gift for us. That was a gift that we wanted to make better and always improve and always protect. When we decided that that was what we wanted to focus on, the gift of our home, we wanted to show God, Spirit, the universe, we wanted to show that we're not going to wait for someone else to do their part. We're going to use our resources to do our part, but we want to do that willingly and humbly because we wanted to return ourselves to being centered and balanced vibrationally. And, I can say that now, but at the time, it was more just not because we understood, oh, it's a vibrational thing, but more just because when we got to that point, we wanted to make it something that we could say it's our actual choice. We're choosing, and we're choosing in a positive way. So we did this as wholeheartedly as we could. And we scheduled with a tree trimming service only to find out a week, I swear, a week before the tree trimming guy was going to show up, that we're seeing somebody, two people walking around in the yard of our neighbor's house. And we stepped outside and we introduced ourselves. They told us that they had just bought his house. We didn't know it was for sale or anything. They had just bought the house because it had gone down so badly. I guess he was just trying to get rid of it. And when we said, well, interesting, just so we're having the tree trimming guy come out. And that's going to be happening next week. They said, oh, well, that's our responsibility. Don't worry about it. We'll take care of that. And they took the appointment that we had already made. But obviously, they used the same tree trimming service, but they took care of it on their dime. And I'm telling you, when you look back at things and you say, I know where we were in our intention. I know that we couldn't avoid the negative vibrations that we felt in terms of, this bad juju between us, and our neighbor. The fact that we just eventually said, okay, well, we're going to let that go. I mean, obviously you have to allow those those feelings, but then we're going to decide what we're going to do. That really makes a huge difference in terms of the vibration. And I think that as far as it being a full circle moment, it wasn't that we've ever felt that we were making deals with the universe. It's not like, okay, well, I'll raise my vibration and then you step in and, like how it almost feels like that's exactly what happened, Somebody arrived a week before and our problem, our adversity, totally switched itself around and was no longer an issue. But we don't make deals with the universe. We simply respect that if I'm facing a situation, then there is a opportunity for me. And if we're thinking vibrationally, if we're including that in our narrative, then what we're doing is making sure to say, okay, well, after I've already gotten past the negative feelings and stuff and allowed for those things, that's just the honest truth, that's how I feel about it, then we can choose what we're going to do. And I think as far as a balanced journey, if we're thinking in terms of being able to feel settled, feel empowered, then we'll choose to be proactive. And I'm just saying that, that was a truly amazing result that I think is also a good indicator of what it means in terms of this vibrational shift and how it can all play itself out. We would have still paid the guy and we would have had the tree trimming done and we still would have had what we needed to have out of the situation. So either way, we did not do it in terms of hoping that some situation was going to change it and we'd be not having to pay for the tree trimming. So I hope that this shows that, overcoming adversity vibrationally does not mean that we ignore our genuine thoughts, our genuine emotions. It's not about telling yourself you shouldn't feel that way. If you're angry, if you're resentful, if you're scared, whatever your vibration is in relationship to your issues, you have to be able to mentally and emotionally walk yourself through that first. You have to be with that. And in a way, when we meet vibration of any kind, I think, good, bad, or ugly, and we just say, okay, I'm going to allow it, I just allow it to be completed, then we'll be able to actually review the situation, to look at it again with more open-mindedness and open-heartedness. You know, you can't do that if your vibration is stuck because you're not allowing that feeling or that thought to just be what it is. And if we have the open-mindedness and open-heartedness to become more aware of the vibrational side, then we'll be able to figure out, okay, how do I want to address that? And in terms of the kind of attitude to nurture in how you want to process vibration and review situations, the two things that have always come up for me is that we have to do these assessments with humility and with gratitude. And I get it. Nobody wants to hear when you're in the middle of some adversity, well, you need to be more humble, or you should be grateful, you know, for all the things that are going right. I mean, those things are true, but you don't want to hear that at that time. And I'm not trying to tell you that. If you are in the middle of your adversity, I'm not trying to tell you to be more humble and to be more grateful. Absolutely not. The thing that is important is you will get to that once you allow yourself to say, I hate this, I'm angry about this, I'm scared, I'm resentful, you know, whatever emotions you do have when you're honest with those emotions, basically when you're honest with spirit, you know, because that's kind of an internal personal thing. When you're honest in those levels of this sucks, or, you know, you can very clearly see that person's in the wrong, then you can say, okay, I accept. That's all I need to say about that. I mean, I have said it and it doesn't change anything, but I have definitely claimed it as that's how I feel. Well, only then can we say, okay, well, I do want to feel better. No matter what, I want to feel better. And we're talking feeling better, mostly mentally and emotionally. But remember, mental and emotional things are having their own vibration. And that definitely comes through in how you physically will feel better. So in all of that, practicing humility and gratitude as this inner practice for yourself, obviously, it's best if we're doing that on the regular, not something that we're doing in the moment of adversity. But it's okay for us to even catch ourselves in the middle of adversity and go, oh, how can I be more humble here? Or how can I be more grateful here? And I'd like to tell you a story about that. Not too long ago, my son was telling me about his frustration at work. And he works across the street from where he parks his car. There's this not super big road, but at the same time, it's really not policed, and people just tear down that road like crazy people. So there are several people who come around that corner, and you can look, make sure nobody's coming, and then cross, only to realize that before you know it, they've come around that corner, and you didn't know it until they're about to hit you. And so you can imagine, he was telling me about how he was infuriated and he cannot believe the recklessness, and all of that was so valid, absolutely. And apparently this was going on for weeks. And his anger was building up, and you know, they're trying to call and say, hey, you need to patrol this street because this is what's going on, and nobody's coming. So, you know, the frustration again of, you know, I'm trying to be proactive, I'm trying to do the right things, and feeling like, you know, I'm still in this situation. So one of the things I mentioned to him was, you know what, you know, in this whole story, what matters to me is that if you're in this situation, I mean, you're valid for everything you're feeling, but if you're in this situation again and again and again, it's very important that you are stopping to say, I'm furious that that person came roaring around the corner, but I'm so grateful that in that moment I saw it. In that moment I stopped myself. You know, I said, that's what matters, because it's not going to matter to me that, you know, that person goes to jail because they eventually maybe hit you in the road. What matters to me is that you never get hit. And if you're in that experience, my concern for you is that you are meant to say, okay, how do I pay even more attention? How do I be even more humble to the awareness that this can be a catastrophic situation, and I want to be aware. So, interestingly, I really think he took that to heart, because several times after that, I would, as I was texting him, tell him, watch out for those crazy drivers. And he would say, yeah, it happened again today. But he said, I stepped back onto the sidewalk and I looked up, and I just said, I know you were watching for me. And that really warmed my heart, because obviously we care very much about the people we love. And yet, what matters even more than that is that he's developing that sense of humility and that sense of gratitude despite his adversity. He's still going to figure out the things that he needs to do to, on the surface, resolve what he can. But way more important to me, that he sees that and he says, I want to pull my own self together and focus on staying centered, because then, he will catch that moment and say, oh, let me step back. Let me be more careful. And in that sense, humility and gratitude, that is always going to help us to humble ourselves before the experience humbles us. And it will give us a focus of magnifying even little blessings, even little wins, smooth moments where we just say, I want to really notice the many blessings that are right here all the time for me. So, despite whatever you might be going through, the adversity that you're facing, it is what it is, and it's definitely got its crappy moments. All of it, I'm sure. But in the sense of nurturing this humility and gratitude, the opportunity we have there is that in being humble and being grateful, we are basically able to say, okay, what am I able to do? So humility is, to me, just asking and allowing for intuition, allowing for spirit to give me nudges. Another story I have for you is when my husband was facing this awareness that he said he was told, you have nodules on your thyroid, and we're going to have to go in and we're going to have to remove that, and then we're going to have to find out if it's cancerous or not. The whole time that we were preparing, waiting for the surgery to come up and so forth, one of the things that I thought about was, vibrationally, this area, the throat, in terms of like what we know about chakras, this area is the throat chakra. And I was looking into what I could find out about that. And I thought, the idea of possibly something within the throat being vibrationally stuck, that could then possibly be manifesting in ways that obviously could be worse for his entire body. I thought, if the throat chakra is the area where, if there's a blockage, it's because we are not freely allowing our expression. I thought, let me talk to him about just considering that, being mindful that, as you're preparing to be possibly told, you have cancer of the thyroid and so forth, let's start looking at the fact that what you can do is deal with acknowledging you're possibly have blocked yourself from speaking your truth, from expressing your emotions. And I want you to know it's a safe space for you to do that with me, and I definitely think it's an important thing to consider. So he, on his own, figured in what he wanted to do to apply that. And what I think mattered there was him being able to just acknowledge that besides what was manifesting as nodules and possibly cancer, there was an opportunity for him to meet that manifestation, which was obviously not something he wanted. So it was some sort of adversity for him, but to meet it in a way that said, I humbly accept that I am a part of my experience, and I desire to work with the possibility of any blockages, and mentally and emotionally choose to allow more of that, So he did his own work internally, and in the end, when he did go for his surgery, they did say that it was non-cancerous. They also said that his other thyroid was so big that it was going to compensate for the fact that he had lost one side of the thyroid. So it was truly an amazing end to what we were anticipating could have been bad. But I think in any kind of health issues where we are facing the adversity of the surface stuff or the tangible stuff, the physical, then we also can apply this vibrational aspect of considering, how do I meet my injury? How do I meet my cancer or whatever internal turmoil is happening in my physical body? How do I meet that mentally and emotionally? Because that can really influence vibration, but again, not in the sense of, it's going to fix things, because we didn't know. And he didn't change how he viewed his experience with his thyroid because he was hoping to make sure that it wasn't cancerous. But at the same time, he was making it a point to say, I'm going through this experience and I want to meet it in all ways as fully as I can. And so in conclusion, I'd like to just encourage you that there is so much support and steadiness for us, even as we do our part to overcoming adversity. There is so much support and steadiness for us in this vibration side of it we don't even consider most of the time. It is something that we obviously shouldn't wait until we're in the middle of adversity to consider, but even then, in the middle of adversity, we can mindfully, mentally, and emotionally bring ourselves to a place of addressing things in a way that says, I'm not sure what vibrationally is needing to be cleared or neutralized, but I'm willing, and you will continue to find ways, because it's as easy as being able to say, I'm not alone, I'm with Spirit, Spirit is with me, and then being able to say, I want to do these things to clear the vibration. It is not necessarily going to make sure that you don't have to pay for the tree service or deal with having thyroid cancer. These types of things are happy ending stories for us. However, we know that every single day we just want to address life in this way, and we aren't saying, it's the guarantee that, it's the secret that means that we won't have to face anything. We'll all be facing things, but it's how we're meeting them. That's what this is about. That's what my channel is about. Is how do we meet the adversity? How do we meet the challenges and turn them into opportunities? And definitely, how do we be mindful in that? I hope that this video has encouraged you in facing your own adversity, in considering vibration when it comes to that, not as a woo-woo thing, but just as an understanding of the universal order of things. Doesn't mean you're gonna wipe out your adversity and situation and not have to deal with it. You will have to walk through it. We all have to, but it's just disciplining ourselves to uphold the principles and perspectives that we need, so that that's our primary goal. And that's a practice that will allow us to not only feel better as we're working through our adversity, but just think about the people watching you, that your children watching you. When you share how you are understanding that there's a more holistic experience and you're trying to meet all aspects of it, not so that you can say, woohoo, we beat cancer or something, because that's not always a promise. We don't know. We might die from cancer. We are able to say, but I know what I'm trying to achieve out of this. I am seeking to neutralize vibration and rise to a more harmonious level with the universal vibration. And that lasts beyond life. It's really the essential, even though it also obviously, at least in terms of the stories that I've shared with you, it definitely also improves and influences the life we have here on earth. And if you want various examples of how this applies in everyday types of situations and different kinds of adversity, then I want you to check out the playlist Navigating Emotions for More Balance. You'll find a link in the description below, and that will help you to understand about like allowing the vibrations of your emotions and your thoughts, bringing them to spirit with a mind, heart, and spirit willingness. And I did create those in my Facebook group, so you're going to see that they're in a slightly different format. But at the same time, I edited them the best I could for our YouTube channel, because I think that those things just inform you in terms of the kinds of things that you might be going through, and how vibration and mindfulness really plays a part in how to walk yourself through those things. So that's all I've got for today. And if this has been helpful to you, hit that thumbs up like button, and I will see you in the next video.